What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. Let's get to the mailbag. I know Jim Harbaugh is your guy, but help some of us understand how you draft him in the top 5 of your coach draft and leave Sean Payton completely off. 73 total games, 49, 22, and 1. 5-3 in the playoffs. No Super Bowls. I don't care what he did in college. I kind of do. I kind of do. I don't think you can just compare Jim Harbaugh to Sean Payton. And listen, I'll wear this one. If I was doing a where Colin was right, where Colin was wrong on this one, Sean Payton, I should have found a place for him on the list. That's fair. I feel worse about him than I do about Stefanski, and I like Stefanski as well. It's a hard list to make. If I redid the list today, there's a decent chance. But look at his last couple years in New Orleans. Look at last year with Russell Wilson. I also bought this list for the next 5 years. And I'm not anti-Sean Payton at all. Like, I understand, like, if he was my coach, I'd feel pretty good about it. But I don't think there's a general manager in the league today that would take Sean Payton over Jim Harbaugh. And I know for a fact, under no circumstance would I. And I'm sorry, like, what you do in college kind of became a lot like the NFL with NIL, with working your roster. And Jim Harbaugh the last 3 years has dominated. And obviously he just won the national championship with an NFL team. And what did he do at Stanford? Took over a joke, and by the end they were in the BCS, and his team was loaded with NFL players. So, like, we can do the resumes. Obviously Sean Payton has a Super Bowl. But, like, shit, 2009, guess what? I was working at Fresno State and had a head of hair. Like, that's a long fucking time ago. It really is. It's a long time ago. I watched Sean Payton, then after that, didn't Jim Harbaugh play Sean Payton in the playoffs? Didn't that happen? And didn't Jim beat him a couple years later for the 49ers? I'm just trying to remember that one. But that happened with Alex Smith. Remember that one in 2011? So they played head-to-head in a big game. He had Drew Brees. Harbaugh had Alex Smith. Guess who won the game? Harbaugh. But again, I don't care. Like, I'm not a huge hold on to 15 years ago. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, it does for, like, talking the legacy and stuff. I'm talking today. Was Shane Steichen even in the NFL in 2009? D'Amico Ryans was a star player. So we have to live in the present. In 2009 or 2015, like Belichick. Now Andy Reid's the top dog. Once upon a time, Michael Jordan was the best player. Then Kobe Bryant was. Then LeBron. Like, things change. So, listen, if you want to be critical of me for Sean Payton, I can live with that. I got thick skin. But under no circumstances would I put Sean Payton above Jim Harbaugh right now. And anyone listening, tell me this. If I told you the next 3 years, let's just pick the next 3 years, all rosters are even. Are you taking Jim Harbaugh or Sean Payton? I think the overwhelming majority, I'm not saying 100%, I think Harbaugh would be, 85-15 ratio. And we're talking Jim Harbaugh. He's one of the best coaches of my lifetime. Think how many guys can go both and kick ass. Urban Meyer, run out in less than a year. Spurrier, laughed at in the NFL. Chip Kelly, kind of a joke now in both, but, like, couldn't do the jump. Got weeded out within a couple years. Harbaugh seamlessly does both. Hey, John, congrats on the engagement. Appreciate it. I graduated back in 2004. What makes you the most nostalgic that time, and what do you miss the most about the 2000s? Go, Pack, go. As I age, I'm sure like many, you find yourself getting nostalgic about certain things. Maybe friends lost or family lost. But I would say I am much more nostalgic about the 90s than I am during the 2000s, would probably be my overall take. I find when it comes to sports, whether it's Michael Jordan, whether it's, some of those 49er teams, when it comes to sports, even Barry Bonds, but he went into the 2000s. But music, movies, I am much more nostalgic about my childhood than I am the college days. I listen, and I don't blame anyone for being this, but I am not that guy that like wish I could go back to college. You mean living in a tiny room with no money? I mean, no, I would much rather be where I'm at today. I have honestly never thought since I left college and I graduated college in '08 that I wish I could go back. I swear to God, it's never crossed my mind. And as the years have gone by, whatever, even if it was like 0.1% might have been there, like, wouldn't mind a college day. It doesn't even exist anymore. So I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun in high school. I guess my high school days were like '01, '02, '03. I would probably be more nostalgic about that than like, listen, I had fun in college. It was a huge part of my life, but I don't miss it. I mean, I honestly never really have. I completely disagree with your take on Joe Schoen. It's been tough to watch the Giants the past 10 years, but most of the blame should fall on the Mars. For any sport, consistently, bad teams usually have one thing in common: meddling owners. I believe Joe wanted to follow what Buffalo did. Get rid of bad contracts. Giants had some bad ones because of Dave Gettleman. Build a solid roster, then draft a quarterback with high upside. After Jones had the great game in Minnesota during the playoffs, I believe the Mara family wanted Jones to stay and push for him to get paid. It's no secret that the Maras viewed Jones as a young Eli. What is a first-year GM to do when the guy who signs your paycheck pushes you to sign a player and you and the coaches don't like? But after watching Hard Knocks, it looks like Shane isn't letting Mara tell him what to do. X letting Saquon walk so he can invest more money into the offensive line. My question is, what is a GM supposed to do when the owner is pushing for contracts and moves that the GM disagrees with? Well, here's the hard part about the Daniel Jones situation. If John Mara completely forced his hand, then that is not on Joe Schoen or Daboll or any of those guys at all. But Joe Schoen has talked about in this show, which, I mean, it's not like they're editing it because we're seeing kind of the raw, uncut, all these conversations. Like, he still believes in Daniel Jones. So I do think it's fair to assume, I'm not disagreeing with you that the Maras wanted DJ and were on board with paying him. But I think it's fair to say that the GM was too. I really do. And watching John Mara with Saquon, he didn't meddle at all. He let him cook. So if we assume that Mara treated Saquon, who he said is their most popular player by far, he's like, I've been around a lot of good players in my life. Newsflash, he has. I mean, Eli beat fucking Tom Brady twice, right? Pretty popular after those games. OC, Tuck, Strahan, Odell Beckham. You know, clearly his family was around back in the day with Parcells. But to think that, I think we have to assume he kind of has let these guys do what they want to do. But if John Mara had forced him to sign Saquon Barkley, yeah, the GM has, what are you going to do? If you work for somebody and they tell you you have to do something, you either have to do it or you get fired. It's the way the private sector works, right? You can't really go rogue when you ain't the boss. Especially, it's one thing too, like when the boss in some of these huge corporations, like corporate America, it's like, yeah, I'm going to go above the boss's head on this one, and I'm going to go right to the CEO because he's middle management. You can pull that off, especially if it works. But I think in this scenario, when that guy is the one signing the checks and it's his team, and it goes for this in anything in the NFL or any business like that. Hell, if like you work for a deli and the owner doesn't want you to make a sandwich a certain way and you make the sandwich the wrong way, like he can fire you. So there's nothing you can do. Really isn't. And it's part of the business you're in because all these GMs answer to that guy. And ideally, you hope they let you cook. And John Mara did. And as I've said over and over, we've seen running backs go. Like I don't think it's that crazy. But just listen to the way the owner talked. He knows their team isn't very good. To go to the rival Eagles, who are good, and watch Howie get the guy for $26 million. It'd be one thing. It's like, God, fucking Howie gave him $43 million guaranteed. Like, that's pretty bold, man. 27-year-old with some injuries. $26 million guaranteed. Brandon Ayuk laughed at that per year. Per year, Brandon Ayuk. Guy catches 74 balls. Laughs at that per season. Demanding trades, not showing up. Per year. That's what Howie gave him, total guaranteed. So to me, like, you got to factor in all the variables. Because the money is a huge... They gave Daniel Jones $92 million. And like you said, if the Mars 100% forced that, I don't blame the coach or the GM. I don't know, like most people, the inner workings of that. But I do feel like the front office was somewhat on board with keeping him, and they misplayed that whole thing. Because even if the Mars were dead set on it, here's what they should have done. And it was obvious at the time. Franchise Saquon, get a contract done. Or I guess they essentially did because they paid Daniel Jones. But they should have just... Let me walk that back. They should have franchised Daniel Jones and paid Saquon Barkley. And I guess they tried. Saquon Barkley would have been an easy extension, even at like $38 million, because that would already factored in last year. And now you would have been looking at probably in the mid-20s, like what Howie gave. And let Daniel Jones hit the open market and go, who are we bidding against? Who in what world is giving him $92 million? If Dak Prescott hit the open market, someone would pay him. That's not debatable. Cousins has hit the open market twice and got a lot of money. Who was paying Daniel Jones? Someone would have been willing to sign him, but 90? Would someone been willing to sign him for 50 guaranteed? I don't know, man. I have a hard time seeing that. Forget what the calendar says. Football season is right around the corner, and that means Best Ball Week at DraftKings isn't far behind. Here's what you need to know. DraftKings Best Ball Millionaire Contest is their biggest fantasy contest ever. We're talking 15 million guaranteed prize pool with two. That's right, 2 millionaires being crowned for the first and second place. If you're a set it and forget it type, I know I am, then Best Ball is for you. No waiver wires, no roster management, bigger rosters, so injuries will not ruin your season. Only the draft, and that's it. You're set for the year. Some of you might have heard I won $18,000 a couple weeks ago at the U.S. Open. It's an incredible high. But $15 million in prize pool, how do you beat that? Multiple millionaires crowned with winning this. I can't even imagine the high being in the mix. And like they said, no roster management. Injuries won't impact you because you got bigger rosters. Still not convinced? Check this out. This year, DraftKings is offering everyone a draft one, get one special. Your $20 entry fee scores you a bonus ticket. Get ready for Best Ball Week at DraftKings. Download the DraftKings app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for all customers who enter the NFL Best Ball 15 Millionaire Contest to get a bonus ticket. Only during Best Ball Week, only on DraftKings. Got a Fugazi Friday for you. I'll keep it short, but I think Colorado and Prime are a giant Fugazi. It was a fun story, but it's gotten weird fast. I just saw Antoine Hill, the number 3 quarterback in the 25 class, uncommitted and is going to Memphis. What is your take? Can't speak to recruiting rankings. Not super. I'm a little more dialed in the summer to the PGA Tour than I am to Rivals.com. But I can't say this. I saw this because the way I did this is I screenshotted all these to make it a little easier. And I just looked before I hopped on their schedule. Obviously, Colorado's going to the Big 12, which no longer has Oklahoma and Texas, which in theory should make it a lot easier. But Oklahoma State's good. Kansas is now good. Kansas State is always feisty. Arizona's turned that program around, even with a new coach. Their opening game is North Dakota State, which I don't pretend to know North Dakota State's roster, but I do understand and do follow football really closely. They are like the Alabama or Georgia or LSU of D1AA. They don't win the championship every year, but they win it a lot. And they have a ton of NFL players. And they are really, really good. So I think it is no lock, and I mean no lock, that they win that game. I think big picture for Deion, what's going to be interesting is, listen, I don't think they're going to be very good. I talked to a couple people around college football over the last like 3 or 4 months. I think a lot of people are skeptical that they can get to a bowl game. Very skeptical they can get to a bowl game. Now, the Pac-12 was really good last year, and they started getting worked. I don't think the Big 12 is as good, but all these teams are better than this. I think a lot of people think their line sucks. I think I saw Travis Hunter, I don't know if it was on Twitch or something, even made fun of his own offensive line. Travis Hunter is a special player. Shedeur is really, really talented. What happens to Deion, right? Like if I'm a high school football coach and my kid is going to be, let's just say, some elite college prospect, and I have him sophomore, junior, and senior year, and we kick ass and take names. Am I a great coach, or did I just have this unbelievable opportunity with my kid? Now, if I keep winning after he's long gone, then I'm a badass, right? Think about the Hurleys. That guy's dad won with his kids and won after his kids. He was an excellent high school coach. What does Deion look like after Shedeur? I don't know. Like, is he landing these sweet quarterbacks? Only time will tell. I mean, their best player is a guy that he's known forever, considers a son, and was able to flip from Florida State. And when I see all these people, and listen, I've always liked Deion. I root for Deion. Some of the stuff with like him and his kids talking shit to the kids on Twitter was, I don't mess with that. But I appreciate Deion going pads in practice. Deion 8. I think people think he's like this kind of super progressive dude because he's on social media. He's pretty old school. And I appreciate that about him. But one, his team's not good enough. And two, what will it look like after he loses two guys? One's literally a son, and the other guy is essentially a son who have a chance to be, Travis is going to be a top 10 pick, and Shedeur, he could either be a top 5 pick or he could, who knows, but he's going to get drafted relatively high, even if things go average. But this notion that like, oh, Deion's not going to be at Colorado long. So you're telling me, let's say Deion, let's say this year wins 5 games. So they go 5-7. Doesn't make a bowl game. So he's been at Colorado 2 years, never won more, never gone 500. He's just going to go to the SEC. He's just some ACC school, is going to hire him. That's not usually the way it works. Now, maybe because he's so famous, but I have a hard time seeing that. I do think for him to get a legit job, let's just say an Auburn, if Norvell would have gone to Alabama, like you do need to hire. These programs want guys to win. And I just, Deion won at the HBCU, but last year, like long way to go. And I think the way he's played it with the portal, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think he's a giant Fugazi quite yet, but I don't think this year's going to be that good. I really don't. I think the max is 5 wins, and I don't think it's inconceivable he has one of those 4 or 5 wins seasons again. He's clearly not going to win like one game, but if he wins 8, remarkable coaching job, and the SEC schools should hire him because his team's not nearly as good as all these other programs he's about to be playing. For a top-level program like Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Texas, do you view the new playoff format as an advantage or a disadvantage for their chances to win the Natty? I could go either way, but it seems like the 12-team playoffs for these teams are almost guaranteed to make the bracket. Then once they are in, talent and coaching takes over. As an example, last year Georgia missed the 14 playoff, but could have easily won it all. I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? You're right about Georgia. They easily could have won the Natty. It is definitely easier to be in the mix now because ever since the 14 playoff, if you've got a couple losses by the end of October, you're in major trouble. And most times, like there hasn't been that many 2-loss teams. So getting into the Final Four is really difficult. Look at the NCAA tournament. It's not that hard to make the NCAA tournament. It is very, very challenging to make the Final Four, right? Making the Final Four is a massive accomplishment, right? Because winning 4 games in the tournament is hard. But let's face it, 64, really 68 teams, it's not very difficult to get in the dance. And now, like you said, the teams you listed, I would say the top 7, 8 programs, it's a major disappointment if they ain't dancing. And that'd be Georgia, that'd be Ohio State, that would have been Michigan with Jim Harbaugh. We'll have to see how this guy is as a full-time head coach. Now with Texas, the way they're recruiting, LSU with Brian Kelly, I think USC, Oregon are going to be under that umbrella. Florida State, Clemson, like anything less than a playoff berth is a disaster. But it's football, man. And this is what makes the sport so much like the NCAA tournament. You have one bad game, you have one bad half where your quarterback throws a pick six and fumbles, and all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, it's 28-7 late in the third quarter. Like, we're the 3 seed, they're the 9 seed, we're in trouble. And that's the thing with what makes this sport so unique. It's one game, it's 60 minutes, and anything can happen. So is college 60 minutes? I'm pretty sure. I'm blanking, summer mode. But yeah, I think it's going to be difficult to win the national championship. I think if you got to the Final Four before, you had a pretty good idea. Like, Georgia's got a pretty good chance. Michigan's got a pretty good chance. Now, you get a bye if you're one of those top seeds. So there's a big difference of getting the bye and having to play that first weekend. But I have to go back and look. You get home games now, which is an advantage before the Final Four. So I would say it's more challenging. Anytime in football, the more games you have to play, the harder it is. I mean, I think that's pretty simple. Love your podcast. Listen to it while I run. If all 32 teams were empty and you had one season to compete for a Super Bowl and you could pick any player in NFL history in their prime, who's the first pick? Who's the first 5 or 10 picks? How many picks would there be before a non-quarterback like LT is taken? Depends what rules we're playing in. If we're playing in 70s, 80s rules, you could take LT in the top 10. You could take a Reggie White, whoever, Mean Joe Green, the great players on defense of all time. Hell, you could take Walter Payton or Barry Sanders or something. If we're playing today's rules, the modern game, I think it's, Brady, Peyton, Favre, Marino, Elway. This isn't in order, right? Montana, Steve Young, Rodgers. I might already said him. Mahomes, Josh Allen. I think quarterbacks are flying. I think if you go like 1987 rules, I'd take LT. I think he'd be in the mix. Aaron Donald. I think these guys would get drafted really, really high. But that's a huge caveat to the whole thing. You could argue just if you know what you're doing as a team builder and it's pick 7 and Dan Marino's on the board or Elway, how do you not pick them? I understand the NFL continues to have more games overseas each year to grow the company and the game. What do you think about the NFL playing a few neutral site games here in the U.S. and potential future expansion cities like San Antonio, St. Louis, and Oklahoma City? I don't think Oklahoma City is ever getting an NFL team. Maybe potentially getting one game a year in Hawaii to bring the NFL back to the islands. Keep crushing it. I think the international games, in theory, have a big picture business element to it, right? So whether you agree or disagree, they feel there's a value of playing in Germany, of playing at Wembley, I don't quite see the value, but playing in Brazil. I understand Mexico City. It's one of the biggest cities in the world. They used to play in Japan, I think, preseason games. If you're going to play in America and I'm an owner of a team, there is no way on God's green earth I'm not playing at my football stadium. It's not happening. International, it's out of my control. I'm a league partner. But like, why do I care? I'm not playing a game in Oklahoma City if I'm the Giants or I'm the Rams or the Niners. It's a non-starter. So the league office has juice, but ultimately the owners are in charge. And just put yourself in their shoes, would never do it. You could argue do something like if you're Cleveland the Browns or the Lions, why wouldn't you play a game? This would be pretty cool, like at the Shoe, or if you're the Lions at the University of Michigan. I could see doing something like that. If you're New Orleans, play a night game at LSU on Sunday night, right? If you're one of the Florida teams at Florida State or Florida, like I doubt that would ever happen, but like that's less crazy. The Rams, remember they played a game at the Rose Bowl against the Chiefs, which was pretty cool. Like that's conceivable, but going outside of your market to these random cities that aren't getting a team, they're just not. And listen, I don't feel bad for St. Louis. They stole the Rams. The Rams were LA's team. You stole them, and you got ejected, right? If you end up marrying someone who had cheated on their significant other, and then 10 years later they cheat on you, like it's kind of on you. I have little remorse. I have more understanding when it comes to the Raiders situation. Oakland's team, even though they left LA, they came back to Oakland and then they went to Vegas. Like I get their animosity toward the league and the whole situation. I don't, zero feelings towards St. Louis. Sorry. Give it to me straight. Niners back in the Super Bowl this season. Well, they're clearly one of the best teams in the league. The Ayuk situation is kind of their only problem. I guess Ricky Pearsall, I haven't seen the update, but was somehow injured, not training, which is never ideal. But overall, let's look at their competition. Who is I would say the Eagles and the Lions have the best rosters beside the Niners in the NFC. And both teams should be playoff teams. And the Niners have played them both the last couple of years. They played the Lions in the NFC Championship. They played the Eagles 2 years ago when Purdy got hurt. They played the Eagles last year in the regular season, developing a little rivalry there. Cowboys feels like it's going to take a step back, and the Niners fucking own Dallas. I think the Packers are a team to keep an eye on. They easily could have beat the Niners in the playoffs. So I would say, and the Rams, while the Niners have mainly owned them, that Rams team, the way they were playing, that feels kind of like the crew that could give the Niners a run for their money. And this is back to the comment about the college football playoffs. Football, man, like Kentucky or Virginia or Purdue, like sometimes you just get knocked off in the first round. Last year, I thought the Cowboys were pretty good. Then the Packers beat the crap out of them. I almost put, at the time, that would have been an unhealthy amount of money when the playoffs started on the Packers to win the Super Bowl. I'm like, I just think they're the best team in the league. I think this is when Rodgers gets number 2. And then Tom Brady beat him in the NFC Championship game. Now, you could argue, did he get too conservative in that game? Did LaFleur screw up when he kicked the field goal? Obviously, we can argue till we're blue in the face, but that type of stuff, historically, like, that's what happens in football. That's how it works. So I would say they're no lock to be in the Super Bowl, but I know anything less than that's going to be a disappointment. And 2, that they have no business not winning, 12 plus games. And if you win 12 plus games, you put yourself in position to have the number 1 seed, which is a huge advantage. Why do major talk shows never talk about my Seahawks? Is it because we're tucked in the Northwest or what? And what do you think about the playoff chances with the new staff? Well, I think you're not quite as sexy as you once were. Let's remember, you guys got talked about a lot when Russell was on the team. It was a major conversation point for talk shows, for podcasts. Russell Wilson was discussed a lot. Why? He was a superstar. And when you have a superstar quarterback and your team's in the playoffs every year, newsflash, you get talked about. But Geno Smith, like, I can't open shows with Geno Smith. Now, Mike McDonald, your new coach, elite defensive coordinator. I mean, he was a badass. Ryan Grubb, your new offensive coordinator, has been incredible in college. Never coached in the league. So I think there's some question marks. You have a talented team. I don't think it's inconceivable you're in the wild card mix. I don't think I'm going to pick you, but it's not because I don't respect you. You have one of the best GMs in the league. Your fan base is awesome, but I think star quarterbacks move the needle. It's just really, it's kind of that simple. And when you had one, you got discussed a lot. Question for the golf mailbag. I'll just answer it right here. Doesn't the PGA's non-compete rule actually empower LIV to steal golfers? It seems to me if the PGA would allow LIV golfers to compete on the tour, they would take away the exclusivity of LIV to many of the top players. Sure, we might not see Bryson 25 times a year on the tour, but we might see him 10 to 12. Instead, now it's just the majors. LIV would be even more relevant than it already is. What are your thoughts? Dan in Lakeville, Minnesota. Itchy nose. Well, eventually this whole thing's going to come together, but I think the huge mistake the PGA Tour made and Jay Monahan, the commissioner, if this was the NFL or this was basketball and he had made a decision like he made to ban them, I think he would have been removed. But because it's golf and it's just a different world, he somehow still survived. And I think that was a catastrophic decision. It really was. And like you said, it led to a lot of these guys going. But now it's too late. I mean, they're going to, whether they merge next year in the next 2 years, it's already kind of over. But yeah, that was I would say any leader in any business, any person that's a decision maker in any role in a company, you get tasked with some decisions that are bigger than others. And when you screw up on little decisions, whatever. Like if I pick a topic that doesn't really work or a segment that a lot of you guys don't like, whatever. I do 5 of these a week. But if I made a decision to, put this behind a paywall and it backfired, like it could derail the show, right? And that would be a huge decision because it's the lifeblood of my business, you people listening. And I think that he made a decision on the lifeblood of his business, which is the players and the star power of 6, 7 guys that defected, and it backfired tremendously. I've been a diehard fan since the 70s. Super Bowl, this is going to be pretty embarrassing, but I'm not quite up on my Roman numerals. I guess it could be 4 was my first memory. Is the V5? Maybe that's 9, either 4 or 9. I've listened to watch any, I listen or watch NFL content unless it's outright poor. I used to watch shows like Get Up and First Take every morning. I'm retired, but I can barely watch Get Up and I'm completely done with First Take. Why is 25% of Get Up and 50% of First Take focused on a team that hasn't made the conference finals? I think he means championship, but in 30 plus years. While the team that has been to 6 straight conference championships and has the most exciting player in the history barely gets any coverage, not to mention the other 30 teams. 32. Maybe he's getting mixed in basketball and football here, but I think he's talking about the Cowboys. I get that Dallas has the largest fan base, but seriously, do the suits not see this? What am I missing? This business, because of the technology, is not that complicated. So when you do a segment on TV, on podcasts, on YouTube, the metrics you get, it's the power of all these streaming services. When they run a series, it's when they run live broadcasts, the information that they could get is stuff. When I worked in radio, the way they equated terrestrial radio, the way they just were able to figure out the ratings were by like 15 to 20 meters when I worked in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco market. I don't know how many people are in the general market, but it's a top 5, 6 market in America. And it's based on, maybe it's a little more than that. Maybe it's like 30 or 35, just meters in a car. And when they listen to your station, you get credit. It was one of the biggest fugazis in the history of the world. I remember when I got out of it, I'm like, they're fucked, because this is an all-time fugazi that is complete BS. And when I started my first podcast, I remember talking to some of these advertisers. I'm like, they are ripping you off. Like, this is a joke. Now, part of it is to be associated, if a radio station has the Yankees or the San Francisco Giants or the 49ers. Like, I get it. But their rating, they have no clue. And I mean no clue who's listening. Well, all this stuff now, we know exactly who's listening for every second, every minute, every day, and where you're listening, the city, the zip code, probably if we wanted to dive deep, the neighborhood. And they know when they talk Cowboys, it not only works, it really works. As you know, I don't talk that much. I don't do this, but I'm not doing the show like they are. If you're on television, like an extra 100,000 people when it comes to advertising is pretty important. I mean, it's important in this show. It's important in any show, but I think it's just based on the metrics. I don't think it's that complicated. The reason they talk the Lakers, the reason they talk the Yankees, the reason they talk the Cowboys is not because all these people give a fuck that much. They truly don't. It's because you have to for business. And ultimately, you're in the business of getting the most people to watch. And I've always taken kind of the approach, and maybe this is why I guess my career is a little slower bleed than trying to just talk Cowboys every day, is I want to, like, I'm just doing what I like to do. Now, also, I'm not a little engine that could guy. Like, I'm not going to talk about things that bore me. And sometimes little stuff kind of bores me. And maybe some of you get mad and talk about some of your markets, but I'm a big market star guy. But I'm with you. The Cowboys, like, I'm not opening up every day talking about McCarthy and Dak, but I get why people do. Like, I understand why the Lakers get talked about all the time. They have the biggest fan base by far. And when they're on TV, the most people watch. It's why they talked about the Warriors like the Lakers over the last 10 years. Because there have only been two teams in the NBA that truly rate, old school wise, Steph Curry and LeBron James and the Lakers. You throw in the Celtics, it ain't the same. Ratings down. And they got superstars. So this formula is pretty basic. Most people that watch, that's what you should do, especially on television. It's why Colin's television show or his podcast based on The Herd sounds a lot different than when me and him talk. It's just a different medium, and the way they equate things, more important to do it a certain way. Cowboy fan from South Africa. Always wanted to go there. I think I'm going to go there one time for sure, actually. My grandparents, well before I was born, had gone on a safari, I think in like the 70s, and one of the people in their safari party got a little too close to a body of water. And that was all she wrote because a crocodile got that person. I don't know if it was a guy or girl. And it was an older person. And they went bye-bye into that crocodile's belly. Jerry may have his critics, but the Cowboys had a net profit of $550 million last year. For those of you non-business majors, net profit means the money after expenses are paid. Pretty good. The closest team was $300 million. They were $300 million more than the closest team. They're too big to say F them picks like the Rams and potentially suck for years. All I'm trying to say is they're making way more money now sucking than they did hosting Lombardi's. From a business standpoint, why risk it? Well, they don't suck. They don't suck at all. 3 straight years of 12 wins in a row. How many teams would have signed up for that? 80% of the league? Now, this playoff, they've sucked in the playoffs, but they have not sucked. They've been really good. They've won the division 2 out of 3 years. So they've been good. And if you're good in the regular season, meaning you're making the playoffs, that's important because, like you said, for your bottom line. Back to the last question. The Cowboys are the biggest thing in America in terms of sports. They're bigger than the Yankees. They're bigger than the Lakers. Because the NFL is the biggest sport in America by a pretty wide margin, and they are the biggest brand. Yeah, they just have the most fans. I mean, they just do. Listen, the Packers and the Steelers are massive brands, and they're in smaller markets. Why? Because they were good 50 years ago. So when you develop generations of fans, like, that's pretty important. Like, why are the 49ers such a big brand for the NFL? Well, the first time they were really good was like 1981. It's 2024. So they had 20 years of being good. In the last 15 years, they've been good a lot. So that's generation after generation. That's important. But I do think Jerry's trying. And, like, ultimately his downfall has just been his quarterback sucked in the playoffs. Period, point blank, end of story. As an Eagles fan, I obviously would probably rate Jalen Hurts higher than the average fan. Probably around 5 or 6, behind Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, and Burrow. Why do you think other people, maybe such as yourself, wouldn't rank him as one of the best quarterbacks in the league? In the Super Bowl, he played the second best of all the quarterbacks behind Nick Foles and played better than Mahomes in it. He just beat Josh Allen in a crazy overtime game where Jalen absolutely carried the Eagles to that victory and was an MVP favorite for the majority of the past 2 seasons. Well, he wasn't the MVP favorite last year, but I hear what you're saying. I think part of it is he was really good 2 years ago. He lost his offensive coordinator, and you watched him last year, and he didn't feel like the same guy. Obviously, turned the ball over a bunch toward the end of the season. It wasn't obviously all his fault. The defense, the secondary looked like me and you out there. I think most people consider him a top 10 quarterback. And at the end of the day, depending on how you've played lately, if you're a top 10 guy, it's the difference of 9 and 6. But if you gave me, like, let's just do some, would the Rams trade him straight up for Jalen Hurts? No. Now, the Eagles wouldn't do that deal either because Jalen's way older. 49ers, would Kyle trade him for Brock Purdy? No. Eagles would say no as well. The Lions, you could argue Jalen Hurts is a better player than Jared Goff, but I don't think the Lions do that deal. So, like, when you start talking about those other guys, like, those other guys are in a different category because when you start talking those trades, like, yes. I think it's a big year for Jalen. It is. Good player, high character guy, works his ass off. There have been some stories out there that he's not vocal enough, but I think it's a big year for him. I really do. Because part of being a great player is doing it over and over and over. Say what you want about Cousins and Dak. They have been doing it for a while consistently. Flawed, never going to be a top 5 guy, but like every year you kind of know what you're getting. Okay, last question. You've discussed at length now the importance of ownership in the league. And I agree. I'm a Bronco fan. And I learned that the Walton Penner ownership is by far the richest in the NFL. $77 billion. You know what's funny is whenever I go in the sauna, I try to listen to a book on tape. Well, it's not really on tape because it's on an iPhone. And I bought Made in America, the Sam Walton story. It is crazy. Like the Walmart I know and how big and dominant it is, his story back in the 50s and 60s, probably more the 60s and 70s of building up that company. If you like business and you like stories from scratch, it's a fascinating listen. He has a net worth of 3 times that of the number 2 family. The Hunts are worth 25. Greg Penner, the team's CEO and husband of Ann Walton, Rob's daughter, has already spent $500 million of their own money on facility upgrades. He was walking on the field in 22 with 1 game left and thought the turf looked rough. So he spent $400K out of his own pocket to have the grass replaced for the last home game when we've been eliminated from the playoffs since week 5. 22 was a rough year for you guys. My question is this: how much, if at all, does the extreme wealth matter? More specifically, how can this capital be deployed? Knowing that his wealth is largely comprised of highly liquid Walmart stock to make the team better on the field. Well, it's weird, right? Because the salary cap, everyone has to follow the same rules. The NFL is a hard cap. So if that number is 200, if it's 240, if it's 250, this isn't the NBA. You can't go above it and pay a luxury tax. Because if you could, they would benefit a lot. So you're hard capped. Where it does work, in the next couple of years when they kind of siphon off that Russell contract on their books, if we're both offering a player in free agency, let's say, $50 million, and Sam Walton, or not Sam Walton, but the Walton Penner Group goes, we'll give you $50 million guarantees, 5-year deal for $100 million. I'm just picking even numbers. So 5 years, $100 million, 50 guaranteed. But that guaranteed, I'm going to give it to you all in a signing bonus next week. I will wire $50 million into your account. Where the other team was like, your bonus was going to be $22 million. So I will double the bonus because I got more cash on hand. That's really where it benefits. Ultimately, facilities in the NFL, no one cares because I'm getting paid to play. So if you got the best facilities in the league and some other team offers me $5 more million a year, I don't care. It does not matter. You think Travis Kelce or Patrick Mahomes give a shit about the stools or the chairs in the locker room? This ain't college. Like, facilities are a little overrated, though I give teams credit for investing in it. Why would you not? This is your business. These are your players. But I think it's more the structure of the contracts and the cash on hand paying guys is where you can really separate, and the signing bonuses and coaches. They wanted Sean Payton. They gave him $90 million. They want other coaches. I saw Jim Leonard is now prominent defensive coordinator or defensive staff member. He probably ain't making $200,000. So it's like, Jim's like, I don't know if I really want to coach. We'll give you a 3-year contract at $1.5 million a year. Hell, we'll pay you like a defensive coordinator. 3 years, $3 million a year. Here's a $9 million contract. So to me, it's coaches and contracts with players, specifically free agents being able to land them and keep guys, right? But ultimately, the cap and the draft capital, everyone's on the same playing field. That's what makes the NFL cool. It's not like the difference with the Yankees and the Oakland A's, right? Or Tampa Bay Rays. It's everyone has the same amount of money in terms of to abide by with the players because of the contract media deals from the league. But the coaching staff is huge, or training staff, or some of the kind of the doctors associated with your team. That type of stuff is really big. Appreciate everyone reaching out. Like I said, at John Middlekauff, Instagram, fire into those DMs, always open. Take your questions whenever. We're going to really get into it moving forward in the season. Can't wait. Have a great weekend. Last show of the week. Peace.